The ragged man pushed open the glass door of the Mercedes dealership with the slow, measured confidence of someone who had walked through countless doors far more intimidating than this one. His boots left faint prints of dried mud on the polished tiles, each step drawing curious glances from the sharply dressed staff. His coat, faded from sun and wind, hung loosely around him, and his beard looked like it had grown during days spent on the road rather than in a city apartment. Yet his eyes, sharp, calm, steady, missed nothing. The showroom was gleaming. Trucks stood proudly under bright lights, polished so perfectly that the reflections of the ceiling panels curved across the metal like water. The ragged man moved toward them as if he had seen them in a dream before. He didn't rush, didn't fuss, he simply observed. He touched the handle of one truck gently, testing the metal, studying the design as though he understood every detail of its engineering. Across the room, two salesmen paused their conversation. One nudged the other with his elbow. "Lost his way," he whispered, smirking. Another laughed quietly and pulled out his phone, pretending to look busy so he wouldn't be the one forced to deal with the time waster. The ragged man ignored all of it. He stepped back, folded his arms, and examined the line of Mercedes trucks with a focus that would have impressed any true professional, if only someone cared enough to notice. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady and direct. "I'll take 5 of these," he said, pointing toward the newest model. The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but sharp enough that even he couldn't pretend not to hear it. One salesman leaned over to another and whispered, 5. He couldn't buy a tire. Still, the ragged man remained composed. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself. He simply waited. A calm story lived behind his silence. Years of work, struggles, deals sealed in dust and heat, responsibility earned through sweat. But to them, he was just a man in old clothes. "Sir," one salesman finally said with practiced politeness drenched in condescension, "these trucks aren't cheap. Maybe look at something more suitable." The ragged man looked at him steadily, eyes unwavering. "No," he said, "I asked about these. 5 of them." For the first time, the room fell briefly still, not out of respect, but disbelief. And that was where everything truly began. One salesman stepped forward, the one who always believed he could read people at a glance. He straightened his tie, walked up to the ragged man, and forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sir, perhaps you didn't hear me clearly," he said, raising his chin slightly. "These trucks are top-tier commercial vehicles. The price of one could buy you a small house." The ragged man didn't blink. "I want the total for 5, he repeated, his voice calm enough to unsettle the salesman. The salesman's smile twitched, and he exchanged a quick look with his colleagues. One shrugged as if saying, "Just humor him." So the salesman tapped on his tablet dramatically, turning the screen so the ragged man could see the 6-digit figure. "There," he said, "that's the price for one. Multiply it by 5 if you want the full picture." Without hesitation, the ragged man nodded. "Good," he said, "call your manager." The salesman froze. He hadn't expected that. He had expected confusion, embarrassment, maybe even an apology. Instead, this dusty, silent man was treating the dealership as if he owned half of it. "Why the manager?" the salesman asked, his voice a shade tighter now. "Because I don't want to discuss this with someone who doesn't take me seriously," the ragged man replied, his tone firm but not angry. That sentence hit the salesman harder than any insult. A few nearby customers glanced over, sensing tension. The 3 salesmen huddled together, whispering fiercely. One said, "He's bluffing." Another hissed back, "Then let the manager deal with him." The youngest of them, the one who had laughed the loudest earlier, suddenly looked less certain. Something in the ragged man's steady confidence didn't match the shabby clothes. When the manager finally arrived, an older man with silver hair and sharp business instincts, he approached with a different energy. He didn't laugh. He didn't judge. He just looked at the ragged man and instantly sensed this wasn't a joke. "How can I help you, sir?" the manager asked politely. The ragged man reached slowly into his coat. The salesman leaned forward, expecting a torn wallet or a few crumpled bills. Instead, he pulled out a sleek titanium company card and an official authorization letter embossed with a government seal. The manager took the letter, scanned it once, then again more slowly. His brows lifted. The salesman's confidence, their smirks, their earlier laughter, Everything collapsed silently between them. The moment the manager finished reading the authorization letter, the entire atmosphere of the showroom shifted. He straightened his posture, cleared his throat, and looked at the ragged man with new eyes, eyes that now recognized power where everyone else had seen poverty. "This is a significant purchase," the manager said respectfully. "May I confirm the quantity?" 5 Mercedes Actros trucks. "Yes," the ragged man replied simply. "And I'll need delivery arranged as soon as possible." The salesman behind them stiffened. They had gone from amused spectators to silent statues. The youngest, the one who mocked the loudest, felt heat rising up his neck. He had joked that the ragged man couldn't afford a tire, yet now he watched the manager treat him like the most valuable customer of the month, maybe even the year. The manager gestured toward his office. "Please, sir, let's finalize the paperwork somewhere comfortable." The ragged man nodded and followed him, but before he entered the office, he paused and glanced back at the row of salesmen. Not a word was spoken, but the message was clear. The men lowered their eyes, suddenly busy with imaginary tasks, pretending to reorganize files or clean surfaces that were already spotless. Inside the office, the atmosphere was entirely different. The manager offered tea, water, even snacks. He spoke with genuine respect now, asking about the construction company the ragged man represented. The ragged man answered calmly, explaining that his firm had just been awarded a major government contract, one that required reliable heavy-duty trucks immediately. 5 today, more in the coming months. The manager listened carefully, doing mental calculations. His dealership had been struggling to hit targets this quarter, and this order alone could push them over the top. "We can prepare all documentation today," he said. "Payment can be processed right now." The ragged man pulled out his titanium card again. "Process the full amount," he said. "No installment plans, no hesitation." As the transaction went through, the young salesman peeked through the glass wall of the office, disbelief plastered across his face. He saw the payment approved instantly. His jaw tightened. That could have been his commission, his biggest one ever. Instead, he had laughed it away. The manager printed the final documents and slid them across the table. "Everything is confirmed, sir," he said, a touch of awe in his voice. The ragged man signed with a steady hand. Outside, the salesman stood frozen. They had misjudged him completely, and the weight of that mistake pressed on them like a stone. The ragged man stepped out of the office, his expression calm but firm. And everyone knew he was not done teaching them a lesson. When the ragged man stepped out of the manager's office, the deal completed, the salesmen straightened as if trying to reclaim their dignity. But nothing could hide the guilt written across their faces. For the first time since he entered the dealership, the ragged man allowed himself a small, knowing smile. "I have one last request," he said to the manager, loud enough for the salesman to hear. The men tensed, unsure of what was coming. "Anything you need, sir," the manager replied. "I want the 3 salesmen who mocked me earlier to personally deliver the trucks to my construction site." The manager blinked, surprised, then slowly turned toward the salesmen. Their faces went pale. The youngest swallowed so loudly it echoed. None of them dared refuse. There was no room for pride after the humiliation they had brought on themselves. "Of course," the manager said. "They'll deliver them today." Hours later, the sun hung low as the 3 gleaming Mercedes trucks rolled onto a wide stretch of dusty land outside the city. It wasn't what the salesmen expected. They thought they would arrive at a small workshop, maybe a roadside project. Instead, they found themselves driving into a massive construction zone buzzing with heavy machinery, skilled workers, surveyors, and engineers moving with military coordination. The project spanned acres, a new industrial complex rising from the earth. It was the kind of site that only a serious company could handle, the kind that meant long contracts, huge budgets, and leadership capable of moving mountains. As the trucks parked in a neat line, the ragged man stood waiting in his dusty coat, hands clasped behind his back. But here, on this land, he didn't look out of place. He looked like the one in charge. Workers called him, sir. Engineers rushed over with blueprints. A foreman jogged up to give him updates. The salesman watched in silent amazement as the ragged man they mocked commanded respect from every direction. He approached them slowly. "You judged me by what I wore," he said quietly. "Out here, clothes don't build anything. Men do." The youngest salesman looked down, ashamed. Another tried to apologize, but the words stuck in his throat. "I didn't bring you here to embarrass you," the ragged man continued. "I brought you here to understand something. Every customer who walks into your dealership has a story. You don't know their past, their struggles, or their success. Respect isn't expensive. You can afford to give it to everyone." The men nodded, the lesson sinking deeper than any lecture their manager could have given. The ragged man pointed at the trucks. "Thank you for the delivery. Now you can go." As they drove away, dust swirling behind them, each man carried the weight of what they had done, and the unspoken promise not to repeat it. The dealership would later learn that the ragged man returned often, buying more vehicles. But he always worked only with the manager. Those who had laughed learned that day. The biggest mistake isn't underestimating someone poor, it's mistaking humility for weakness.